All right, so we are diving into The Vanishing Half by Bennett. It's gotten a ton of buzz online, a Goodreads Choice Award winner, and a GMA book club pick. Like the whole 9 yards. But is this book worth your time? That's what we're here to figure out.
Well, basically what we've got here, from professional reviews to reader comments, I'd say it's a definite yes. But with a caveat, this book, it will hit hard if you're looking for a powerful character-driven story about race, family, and the choices we make. But if you're after a fast-paced page-turner, this one might not be for you.
So complex and potentially slow-paced. To figure that out, let's get into the nitty-gritty. For those unfamiliar, what's the basic setup here?
So the story centers on identical twin sisters, Stella and Desiree Vignes. They grow up in a small southern black community, but ultimately choose drastically different paths. One sister decides to pass as white, building an entirely new life for herself, while the other embraces her black identity.
Wow, talk about a family rift. And it sounds like this choice reverberates throughout their lives. The review from Giselle reads mentioned this book spanning decades. Is that one of those sprawling family sagas?
Exactly. It's not just about the twins, though. Their choices are definitely the catalyst. We also follow their daughters, seeing how the ripple effects of these decisions impact the next generation.
So multi-generational, definitely hitting on some weighty themes there. Giselle Reads also highlighted how the book explores race, class, and culture. But I saw some Goodreads reviews mentioning that the pacing is pretty slow. Is that something readers should be aware of going in?
Yeah, a few reviewers did mention the pacing. It's definitely not a thriller. It's literary fiction at its core. Bennett takes her time to delve into the characters' inner lives, their motivations, their struggles. Think of it like a slow, simmering stew, not a quick microwave meal.
Okay, I get that. But for those of us who prefer our books a little spicier, what makes the writing so captivating that it justifies the slower pace?
Well, Bennett has a real knack for getting under the scare of her characters. She doesn't shy away from difficult emotions. Take, for example, a passage where Stella reflects on her choice to pass. At first, passing seems so simple, but she was young then. I hadn't realized how long it takes to become somebody else, or how lonely it can be living in a world not meant for you.
That's heavy stuff. You can practically feel the weight of that decision, the isolation she experiences. But does the book really delve into those complexities? Or is it more telling than showing? I mean, some Goodreads reviewers felt that Stella's internal conflict wasn't explored as deeply as they'd hoped.
There's definitely room for debate on how deeply Stella's internal life is explored. Some readers craved more insight into her thought process, particularly around her decision to leave her family and essentially erase her past.
Yeah, that's something I'd be curious about too. If you're going to build a whole life on a lie, there have to be layers of justification. What about Desiree, the twin who embraces her black identity? Does the book give us a good sense of her perspective?
Absolutely. We see the world through Desiree's eyes as well. Her experiences navigating a society steeped in racism and prejudice. And through their daughters, we see how differently their choices play out in the next generation.
So it's not just about individual choices, but also how those choices ripple outward, affecting families and communities. This is starting to sound a lot like Nella Larsen's Passing, which also deals with a light-skinned black woman choosing to live as white. A few reviewers brought that book up, so I'm guessing there are some parallels.
There are definitely similarities. Both books explore the complexities of racial identity and the societal pressures that can lead to these difficult decisions. However, The Vanishing Half goes beyond simply exploring passing. It delves into broader themes of family, class, and cultural identity.
Okay, so it's expanding on familiar territory, but bringing in new layers. Giselle Reads also mentioned a trans character named Reese. Does his story tie into these broader themes as well?
It absolutely does. Reese's journey adds another dimension to the book's exploration of identity, showcasing that it's not just about race. He's navigating his own path, facing societal expectations and prejudice. Much like the twins.
So we're seeing different facets of identity explored here, different ways people grapple with who they are in a world that tries to define them. I'm curious, are there any specific moments in the book that really highlight these struggles?
Well, one that stands out is when Stella, years into her life as a white woman, encounters a black family that moves into her affluent neighborhood. You can feel the tension, the fear of exposure, the sudden confrontation with the life she left behind. It's a powerful moment that reveals just how much she's sacrificed and how precarious her constructed identity really is.
Wow, that does sound intense. It makes me think about those Goodreads reviewers who wanted more of Stella's internal conflict. Do you think this scene delivers on that? Does it give us more insight into her emotional state?
It definitely offers a glimpse into her inner turmoil. She's clearly shaken by the encounter, forced to confront the reality she's been trying to outrun. There's a flicker of recognition, maybe even kinship, but it's quickly overshadowed by fear and the need to protect her carefully constructed life.
It sounds like she's trapped in this constant push and pull between who she is and who she's pretending to be. It must be exhausting to live like that.
Exactly, and that's what makes this book so compelling. It doesn't just present these issues in a theoretical way. It puts you right there in the characters' shoes, feeling their anxieties and vulnerabilities. You understand the weight of their choices, even if you don't agree with them.
It reminds me of the whole nature versus nurture debate. How much of who we are is predetermined, and how much is shaped by the choices we make? This book seems to be wrestling with those questions, particularly through the lens of race and societal pressures.
Absolutely, and it's not just about individual choices, but also the legacy we inherit from our families, our communities, our history. The book explores how these forces shape our identities, sometimes in ways we can't control.
So even though the book is set in the past, these themes feel incredibly relevant today. We're still having conversations about race, identity, representation. It's like the book is holding up a mirror to society, forcing us to confront these uncomfortable truths.
And it does so in a way that's both thought-provoking and deeply personal. It doesn't offer easy answers or prescribe solutions. It simply presents these complex situations and invites you to draw your own conclusions.
That's what makes for a truly great book, in my opinion. One that stays with you long after you've finished reading, prompting you to think differently, to see the world with new eyes. Based on everything we've discussed, it sounds like The Vanishing Half checks all those boxes.
It certainly does. It's a beautifully written, emotionally resonant, and intellectually stimulating novel. It's one of those books that you want to discuss with friends, to unpack the layers of meaning and explore the different perspectives it presents.
Speaking of unpacking, I'm curious about those Goodreads reviews that mentioned wanting more depth in certain areas. Do you think there were any aspects of the book that felt underdeveloped or rushed?
It's true that with such a wide-ranging story, spanning multiple generations and tackling complex themes, there are bound to be moments where some readers crave more detail. For example, a few reviewers felt that the exploration of Stella's relationship with her daughter could have been more nuanced.
That's a valid point, especially given the central theme of choice and consequence. It would be interesting to see how Stella's decision to pass impacts her daughter's own sense of identity. Were there any other areas where you felt the book could have gone deeper?
Well, some readers expressed a desire for more historical context, particularly regarding the Jim Crow South and the specific challenges faced by Black communities during that era.
Yeah, I can see how that added context would enrich the story, providing a deeper understanding of the societal forces at play.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that Bennett is ultimately crafting a work of fiction, not a historical treatise. Her focus is on the characters and their emotional journeys within this specific historical backdrop.
That makes sense. It's a reminder that every book has its limitations, its scope. And as readers, we bring our own expectations and desires to the experience. But even with those caveats, it sounds like you're wholeheartedly recommending The Vanishing Half.
Without a doubt, it's a book that will challenge you, move you, and stay with you long after you've turned the final page.
So for anyone listening who's thinking, okay, this book sounds heavy, is there a payoff? Does it leave you with a sense of hope or just a feeling of, wow, life is complicated?
Well, it's definitely not a light, feel-good read, but I wouldn't say it's bleak either. It acknowledges the complexities of life, the weight of history, the impact of societal forces. But it also suggests that even within those constraints, we have the capacity to make choices and forge our own paths.
I like that. So it's not just about being defined by your circumstances, but about finding agency within those circumstances.
Exactly. And that's a message that I think resonates deeply, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with messages about who we should be and how we should live.
The Vanishing Half seems to be pushing back against those expectations, encouraging us to embrace the nuances and complexities of identity.
Absolutely. It's a book that invites you to think critically about these issues, to challenge your own assumptions, and to engage in meaningful conversations about race, identity, and belonging.
It sounds like a book that has the potential to spark some really interesting discussions, especially for book clubs.
Oh, definitely. It's rich with themes and characters that would lend themselves to lively debate and analysis. It's one of those books that you finish and immediately want to talk about with someone else.
Well, I think you've given our listeners a lot to chew on. The Vanishing Half clearly tackles some weighty issues, but it also sounds like a beautifully written and emotionally resonant story.
It is, and I think it's a book that will stay with you long after you've turned the final page.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Vanishing Half. So tell us, is this book going on your to-read list? Let us know your thoughts. We're always up for a good book chat.